Okay, so this video is not at all planned. I've just finished recording a very long podcast with Manik, and it was in several ways a kind of reflection for my journey throughout my med student days to UK, to Australia, and now at a more personal level. And it just occurred to me, what advice would I give to my 25-year-old self when I left Pakistan? Because it seems to me that all we've talked about is just sort of a quick summary, which, even though I was talking more on a professional front, it hit really home on several personal factors which I could not really talk about openly in a podcast. So I thought I'll just record this video on those personal matters, and obviously intertwined with some professional matters. So it's not it's not scripted, it's just completely from my heart. And grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea or anything, and we'll just take it from there. So I'm going to talk my journey through my final year medical student days in Dow Medical College, my decision that led me to take PLAB exam and going to the UK. What are my triumphs and disaster in the UK? I'd call it disaster, obviously, because I ended up leaving that country. And how did I pick myself up from those failures, and then came to Australia? And if I look at Australia, what have been my peak successes professionally and personally? And based on all of those experience and all of that journey through two different countries, from Pakistan, UK, and now in Australia, what did I learn and what would I tell a 24-year-old Rizwan? And look, if you're not into this kind of thing, you can just leave the channel right now and go away and make a better use of your time. But this is more my self-reflecting journey and a diary from that point of view. So I, as I said, I graduated from Dow Medical College in Karachi. I was born and bred in Karachi, and I like that town. Warm, humid summers, sunny afternoons. I had a lot of friends in medical college, as most of you would have lots of friends as well. And I was an average student during my pre-medical college days, and even in the earlier part of the medical college. But then in the final year, I really sort of focused on the clinical subjects and tried to make it better, because I realized that in order to make it better somewhere else, as in some other country, I have to be really good in terms of my concept. So my first lesson in that journey, transitioning from pre-med to med, was that, look, build strong concepts. And now, what led me to a decision to make a PLAB? Actually, I did not want to take a PLAB. I wanted to do USMLE. I even bought books from Azam Sons, which is a bookstore in front of the Dow Medical College. And I brought the books back home. And then I was having a conversation with my fiance at that time. And she said to me that, look, we have to get married and we have to leave Pakistan together, because I'm not going to wait here for you if you're investing yourself in the USMLE journey. Also, I think at that point in time, my concept was misconstrued, that if I go to US, I might not be able to pick a specialty of my own choice, like if I want to go to surgery or if I want to do some other thing. I'd never thought about doing emergency medicine, although I had inkling towards emergency medicine, but I never thought that I'll end up doing that. So yeah, there were several personal and professional factors which let me decide, return those books to Azam Sons. And he said, why don't you make your point, man? Normally people buy their books, they're actually pretty sure as to what they want to do. So yeah, and then I was left with PLAB. I had been going to the UK in my summer holidays, and I liked sort of environment. I did find it very cold and chilly, not talking about the weather, but just generally, and people were a bit more reserved. Obviously, I've never been to any other country, and I thought maybe that's the way how people are. And I thought, okay, fine, doesn't matter if I go to US, UK, it's all the same thing. And now I reflect back on that, and that thought maybe it was a best decision. As I later, progress on to the UK side of things, the first job was a task, like multiple jobs. I was applying for hundreds of jobs and, doing multiple interviews and not getting successful. And now I think, you don't have to face the hardships to get what you want to do in life. This life can have simplistic approach as well. You can do whatever you like to do with much more less derogatory way of applying for jobs countless time and interviews countless time and being rejected and feeling low and going more backwards in your own mind. But anyway, that was what we call a struggle phase. If that was a struggle phase, so be it. But then again, after all those time spent working in the UK and doing the MRCS exam, I thought finally maybe I'm getting somewhere. And then at that point, it realized, no, you're not getting anywhere. I could not get into emergency medicine training, and I was also thinking about some of the surgical pathway. I could not get onto those surgical pathways, so it was a bit of a disappointment. That, like, what else now? Like, I've got all the UK experience, I've done all the exams, I've done a few audits, and I interview reasonably well. I talk and present myself okay. What else could you ask me for? And that was a disappointment. So anyway, at that point, there was a roadshow in Australia, and they thought, okay, fine, I'll give it a go. So I came to Australia with the mindset that, look, I'll spend here about close to 12 months and then go back to the UK to resume my training. Those 12 months became, 12 years, and now 17 years and counting, and never look back. So my reflections on UK is that the hardships in the UK are personally demoralizing, they are professionally challenging, and I don't think it was worth all that to go through those hardships. You could have, if I had known better at that time, maybe about AMC or some other country, I would have kind of gone into that pathway without subjecting myself to that much torment. And anyway, so that is just a part of growing up, I guess. You don't feel those things when you're in the system. You just kind of accept the brutality of the system and professional and personal failures, and you're just trying to say, oh, it's a part of the success, everybody's doing it, so might as well I keep on doing it. However, when I came to Australia, everything was like so welcoming. Like, okay, there are jobs here, and there's you get onto the training program very easily. You pass the primary fellowship exam in terms of getting onto the emergency training exam. You get the permanent residency very easily. Everything sort of happened seamlessly, and I thought, okay, fine. Look, I remember that. I'll give you an example. I remember this one time, when I came to Australia, I went to the stationery store, the Office Works, and bought reams and reams of paper. And then I was talking to my colleague at work in emergency department that, look, I went to the Office Works and I've got like 4 or 5 reams of paper. He said, why have you done that? I said, because I've got a job now, but for next year I have to apply for jobs, and I think I have to apply for hundreds of jobs. He said, well, I don't think so. You can just keep on getting the job in the same hospital, and they'll sponsor you visa, they'll sponsor you permanent residency. You can pretty much complete all your training in this hospital. I said, really? Can it be possible? And it was. And I pretty much trained entirely all of my training in St. George Hospital here in Sydney, in Kogarah. And those were the most beautiful learning years professionally. I did my emergency training there, I did my anesthesia training there, trauma training there, ICU training there, pediatrics. I had brilliant time in pediatrics. And the people overall just were so supportive, I guess. And I just kept on. I think if you're provided with the right environment and support, I even published a research here. Just because, Stephen Asher, and thank you, Dr. Stephen Asher, if you're watching this video, he looked into and listened to my ideas and said, Rizwan, that's a very good publishable material, and made a publication on that. So if you are surrounded by people who support you, who encourage you, you can really do too much. And the fellowship support that I received in St. George Hospital, everybody would prepare me for writtens and OSCEs and everything. It was just fine. And when I passed the fellowship exam, which obviously was a lot of hard work, don't get me wrong, it was still a hard work, but it was not demoralizing or insulting in a way, that I was able to get myself into jobs to pass through the fellowship exam. Obviously there came a time where there's a bit of professional challenges, there's a financial challenges because you go part-time. But then, it was all worth it. And it was perhaps the most happiest day. If I was to define my 3 key moments in Australia so far, I think that was the number 1 moment when I passed my fellowship of emergency medicine, and I got titled FACEM. When I got those letters and I got given those, degree in a ceremony in New Zealand at that year, it was just like, man, I've done something which I always thought of dreaming in terms of achieving fellowship. you know, and then, you know, I got to work as a consultant in a bigger hospital, Liverpool Hospital. Again, the same kind of positive vibes, encouraging. I didn't, honestly, for you to say to me, reflecting on it, I never faced racism in its angry form. I would say in Australia, maybe people may have had some racial connotations underneath, but I didn't feel it. Maybe I was just too naive, but I felt more support, generally speaking. And that sort of kept on encouraging me. And I went on from being a registrar to a consultant, and I felt that, look, there's been so much trust put in me. I started this emergency focus that I should help others, other IMGs. And so I started emergency focus project with courses and, you know, career guidance. And now this business is 5 year old, and alhamdulillah, it's doing leaps and bounds, that it affords me to be working part-time and be able to replace my income. I'm very thankful to God. So with a little bit of encouragement and the right environment, you can achieve a lot. And I think that I've been very blissful, and that would be my like second peak moment of to be able to start my business. My third thing in Australia, in terms of peak, I would say a very well-balanced social life. I managed to get a lot of traveling done. I remember when I was in the UK, I never sort of went on holidays, living in other countries, like living in Europe. I think it was more unique to me because I was just so stressed out in the first few years. But I see plenty of my colleagues, they go to Europe, they go visit different parts of the UK. But I think I was just more uptight. Maybe I just took it personally in a wrong way. So I think based on that, what would I tell to my personal self, a 24-year-old Rizwan? I think I've written a few points reflecting on that one, not scripted, but just points. I would say that study well in your medical college, especially, you know, the concepts that you built in the early years, in first year, second year, third year, final year. They're just so valuable when it comes to passing the licensing exam and even the fellowship exam. You'll appreciate this fact that, look, fellowship and licensing exams are nothing but a more, they're all about the same revision of anatomy, physiology, pathology, pharmacology, and communication skills, and bit of medical and medicine and surgery and obstetrics and gynae. It's all same, at least for me in emergency medicine. It was all like super condensed and formatted to an exam. And just because I had a good conceptual learning in those building blocks of my med school, I was able to pass these exams with relative ease, both AMC and PLAB, and eventually my fellowship exam here in emergency as well. What about my decision in terms of US versus UK versus eventually landing up in Australia? I would say it does not really matter. Like I'm now looking at my colleagues who are in the US, looking at my colleagues who are in the UK, and obviously myself who is in Australia, and they're all happy in what they've got. So I think that discussion that which country is the best country, US versus UK versus Australia versus Middle East versus staying even, I won't say staying even back in Pakistan for a moment. I think the only decision that you should make is whether you want to stay in Pakistan or whether you want to leave for overseas, back somewhere else, because that's at the end a major difference. And I think if you want to go to overseas, that doesn't really matter. Sometimes people think about that, look, I need to earn very well and US pays better, and you know UK doesn't pay well, but the training is better, and Australia is probably a bit of both. It doesn't matter. I think what matters is that you slow your burnout rate and you have a long lasting earning years with professional fulfillment. That's what matters. And I think where I am right now, and I think where my colleagues are in the US and the UK, they are at that level 20 years, 22 years after the medical college, that they are feeling happy in where they are. So it doesn't really matter. Don't overthink it, and the life will take its own form and course of action. Maybe you'll start in Australia, end up being in the US. There are quite a few people who've done that, or vice versa. Being in the US, I'm working with 2 emergency medicine colleagues who are from US and working here in Australia. They might not have ever thought, and plenty of UK people who are coming to Australia. So it's all mixed up, and don't overthink this part. The fourth thing I would say that, look, every specialty is possible. I remember when I was in my fourth and final year, I was just very much switched on about like I want to do surgical specialty. In particular, neurosurgery excited me very much. I used to write articles in Dawn that look, neurosurgery is something that I'd really like to do. Little did I understand anything about what kind of lifestyle, or I just thought that they just look cool, and what they did was very cool, without understanding, the patient interaction, the operative intricacies, and the follow-up. But later I realized that neurosurgery patients, if you're operating on a tumor, these patients often don't have a good prognosis. Sometimes they may even do. The back pain patients often don't improve after a back pain surgery, and they've got long-term pain, and they don't have that level of communication. I'm not, minimizing the work that neurosurgeons do. They're brilliant surgeons, and they do a lot of brilliant work. But I think my expectation from a neurosurgery being cool was based on the coolness of operations rather than focusing on the nuances of neurosurgery, which I didn't see as a medical student. And I think that bit of little disappointment that I could not get on a neurosurgical training program was perhaps better in a way, because my understanding was significantly lacking. But if you like neurosurgery for what its positive and negatives are, then good for you. You might as well just go and join that. But reflecting onto that, every specialty, if you're committed, here in Australia, people are doing radiology, anesthesia, ICU, emergency medicine, cardiology, neurosurgery as IMGs. If you're committed, there's no one who can stop you. Obviously, there's going to be different levels of competitiveness, but there's no one who's stopping you to achieve any of your dreams. So don't worry about it too much. Just keep up the hard work. The final, thing that I do is the family matters a lot. Family is important. I've had my father died when I was during my training in emergency medicine. Even though my father and I, coming from Pakistan, obviously shared a very different relationship in an Eastern background, but I tend to miss him more based on his wisdom and his chats. Now that I'm perhaps at the age where he was when he wanted to talk to me more, I was not available. So value your family, your wife, your children. They're the source of joy, and they're going to keep on carrying you over the years through your hard work. It doesn't really matter how much you earn, how much you achieve in terms of house and cars. If you've got a family who loves you, regardless of all those provisions, that's just timeless. As I said, I missed my father very much, but he's not around, and I've often, when I see people sharing their parents, that they're coming and visiting them, it just makes me that, look, maybe I should have been able to do that. And it's worth losing fights in family front. It doesn't really matter if you have to win every argument. In fact, I think losing arguments with your family members or with your good friends makes you a more likable person, because let people have their own wins. Let them have their little triumphs over you. In this little triumphs, they may find a person who they can rely on, that he'll listen to me, he'd give up on me. It doesn't really matter that you have to win every argument, every fight, every confrontational discussion or decision. The life in its happiness forms is and can be enjoyed in its very core and very simple way. So yeah, that's what I tell to myself. Hopefully once my son is grown up and watching this video, he'd probably reflect on those things, that maybe it's time to look after the family and not worry about too much what to do in life, but just to keep on doing it and just enjoy the journey through its course without making too much enemies. And that's my reflections, and that's what I'd advise the 25-year-old Rizwan. Look after yourself and each other. Goodbye.